Welcome back, fellow Illumineers, to be our guest. I am Heath Collier, and I'm excited to be with you here again today to go over more draft reviews. Yeah! Yesterday's was interesting, wasn't it? At least the first 30 seconds, I think, was worth it. I don't know about the rest of it, but yeah, that was a tough one. Not much to be had there, not much that was great, but I mean, ultimately, I think that's still great content to dig through because you need to know what are the few one-drops that you can scoop up, and you need to know the implications of that on the rest of the draft. Well, from feast to famine, at least in terms of quantity, we're doing 2-drops today, 2-drop reviews. If you haven't checked out yesterday's, I highly recommend you do, because ultimately what we want to try and do is help you formulate your curve throughout, right? So as you build towards your ideal curve, what are the hits you want at each point to be able to make your ideal deck. So that's how we're breaking it down this time. No more color separations, at least this time. I reserve the right to go back to it in the future, but I think this might be the formatting going forward. Now we got 48 2-drops to cover today, so I'm going to try and blitz through a lot of them. I might not give as thorough an explanation as I normally do. I'll try and dig deep into the ones that might be controversial or borderline, but for the ones that are just obvious, I'm going to probably be quick about them. So just fair warning on that, and hopefully bear with me as we get through 48 of these today. Now, for the rest of the week, we're actually going to have some guests on for each of the remaining ink costs. So we're going to have 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, and then we're going to do 6+ all together, lumped together. We've got some amazing guests. I won't spoil them yet, but I look forward to those conversations. But I didn't want to put anyone through the slog of 48 2-drops that are all kind of mid. And also just, it would have been a 3-hour video if you had me and someone else talking about 48 2-drops. So we're going to dive right into it. Without further ado, here's past Heath to walk you through our rating systems and what the heck this all means. Take it away. So we're going to do A, B, C, D, F as our rating system. A is first pickable and happy to first pick it. This is a bomb or just really effective card. There are commons that are absolutely within this territory. But ultimately, it's something that you're just like, you open your pack, you look at it, and you're like, yeah, this is the one for me. Love this one. Happy to have it, right? That's an A. B is, I'll first pick it, but I'm not going to be absolutely thrilled about it. But I'm definitely very happy to pick this up and have this in my deck. I will always play this card, and I'm going to kind of be picking it in the first half of the pack. C's are your, like, journeyman staples of your deck. You're almost always going to play these cards unless you've drafted so well that your deck's just crammed full of A's and B's. So you're always going to play these cards, or almost always. But you're not exactly thrilled to be taking them. You're just like, okay, these are cards that are going to fill out my deck, right? These are the cards that you want kind of in the middle to last half of the pack, and they're solid. D is, ideally, I'd like to not have this in my deck. I will play this, but I'd like to not have this in my deck if I can help it, and I'm certainly not wasting any early picks on it. These are cards that you are going to be picking up because it's the only cards left in the last third of the pack, right? Ideally, these should all be inkable. If they're that bad, you should not be taking an uninkable card that's that quality, right? And then F is don't play it. And usually that's because they're uninkable and they're like D quality and uninkable. But it could also, there could be some inkable cards that I rate as S just because they're so bad. And in that case, obviously, if they're inkable and you need ink, you're going to play them in your deck because you're only eliminating 8 cards that you drafted. So if you have, 8 uninkables that are Fs, you're going to play an F that's inkable, of course, right? But you should try never to have this anywhere near your deck, and you should only be using it as ink if I've got an inkable F in there. And we're back. All right. Thank you, past Heath. Hopefully that makes some sense to you as we dive into these. Let's go right into Trusty as number 1. Trusty, the loyal bloodhound. Love this character. He's a 2-cost inkable, 2/2, 1 lore. ally, and I mentioned I'm going to try and highlight allies as I pay attention to them, quite frankly, because ally matters might actually be a relevant synergy in this set, and he's got support. So echoes of others that have come before. This isn't the first one body like this in a set, and it's always been kind of okay. Support is great, a great ability, but it's not so great if the body that it's on just gets knocked out, gets banished super easily after the first use. So it's basically, at a body like this, it's almost a 2-cost 2/2/1 that gives +2 strength to something for 1 turn, because it's probably not surviving beyond that. So what does that equate to? Probably like a C. Like, ultimately, I think that's going to be where we're at, is kind of C quality there. So let's go with C for trusty. Next, we got the Troubadour, musical narrator. He is a 2-cost inkable 1/3/1 lore with resist +1 and singer +4. The fact of the matter is, singer is not going to be relevant here, especially at 4 cost. There isn't really anything for him to sing. So really just consider him a 1/3/1 with resist, which isn't particularly good. Now, he's still an inkable character, and he's not doing nothing, so I would still have him as a high D. But really, I would not want to have him in the deck. If I do, I'm treating him as ink. Next, we got Candlehead. Candlehead, the dedicated racer. They're trying to do a racer theme in this set and really failing horribly. So we got a 2-cost inkable 2/2/1 lore. She is an ally. When this character is banished, you may remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. Fine. Again, like I mentioned on the last video, I don't like removing damage without any other real impact there. You are getting a body, but the problem is on banish abilities are much less under your control. Yes, you can obviously challenge and banish her, but if it's banished on your opponent's turn, what they can do is try and make sure that they remove the characters that you would heal, that you would remove the damage from before they remove Candlehead. So if you've got a clever opponent, they could completely nullify this. So at 2-cost 2/2/1 lore, that's not so far off vanilla that it's that bad, but I still would categorize that as below trusty, so I've got that at like a C-. Next, we got Penny Bolt's Person. So if you saw our quick hits video, you'll know this is one of my top 2 drops in the set, second best specifically, and it's a 2-cost inkable 1/2/2 lore ally. When you play this character, you may remove up to 2 damage from chosen character, and they gain resist +1 until the start of your next turn. So, you get the damage removal on play, so you can control it much more effectively. And you get resist +1 until the start of your next turn. So presumably what this is going to do is heal up one of your bigger bodies, allow them to run into a character without trading, and then potentially even survive until the next turn. Or at least need something more substantial to take them down. That's a great combination. The problem is that's not an effect you really want on turn 2. So again, going back to how slow this set is going to be, some of the best, one of the best 1-drops, or the best 1-drop, Mulan, you don't necessarily want to play turn 1. It's not terrible to play turn 1, but you don't necessarily get the best out of it turn 1. Penny, you absolutely don't want to play turn 2. So yeah, it's really slow. Your 2-drops are not something that you want to necessarily play on curve. So Penny's absolutely a B, but you gotta be cautious with when is the right time to play her, and don't play her too early, right? Don't play her to just give resist +1 to your 1-drop. That's not really having as big of impact as it could. The Prince. This is one I'm probably gonna have to spend a little bit more time on, because apologies to Katie, Lore Keepers In, shout out Katie. She's got some amazing draft videos out right now. If you haven't checked them out right now, quite frankly, pause this one, go check her out. No, maybe don't, but I mean, still, check hers out immediately or as quickly as you can. She's great in general, and I love that she's bringing more limited content to it. But she loves The Prince. She got it a 5 out of 5. And I'm going to tell you what, unless you've got a really particular use for it, I've got this as an F. So I got to justify it so Katie doesn't come and rip my face off. 2 costs, uninkable, 0/5/1 lore, bodyguard. So, the uninkable is a problem, but let's ignore the uninkable for a moment. I'm going to come back to it and just say uninkable for me always brings it down a little bit from what it could be. But let's talk about it just on face value right now. So a 2 cost 0/5 bodyguard, right? So on turn 2, that's going to survive it for a couple of turns, right? Like on turn 2, there's not much that's going to take it out, even on a couple of swings, right? So it might survive a couple of turns. And when it does go down, it's going to distract a couple of your opponent's characters. That's useful, sure. But the problem I have is I hate giving up free cards, which is to say, my opponent having to take the time to and the ability to challenge this is not free, right? They could be questing otherwise, challenging other things. That's not technically free. But what I mean to say is when I mentioned the war of attrition, that is most limited environments. When you're going back and forth on card advantage, if you're giving up a card without taking a card from them in turn, in other words, a trade in a challenge or removal for a character or something like that, I get to challenge your prince and I don't lose anything in return. That's card disadvantage at that point. It's tempo advantage. It's maybe some of asset advantage in terms of they weren't able to quest or challenge something else. But that's just not enough. And there will come a point where they'll just be able to swing their 5-cost 5/6 vanilla into this really easily and not break a sweat doing it. So in the first few turns, it'll survive a bit. Later on in the game, it's going to be a complete dud. Now, I say complete dud. I mentioned I love bodyguards. I've mentioned this many times. If you're new to this channel, I love bodyguards. So it's not a complete dud in that it could stall the board enough in the later game to allow you to potentially quest a victory. So I don't want to dismiss it completely. The reason why it's an F for me is because it's uninkable. So ultimately, if this was inkable, I'd probably have this as like a C, C-. The fact that it's uninkable drives it down for me. Now, I mentioned unless you've got particular circumstances. So if you've got Isabella Madrigal, the 5-cost uninkable 3/3/4 lore, or you've got just really other things that really benefit from bodyguard, this goes up in value. But I try to review in a vacuum, which is to say I'll let you know about circumstances where this might go up in value. But in terms of my overall rating, I try to do it in a vacuum, the average deck. And the average deck just isn't going to benefit enough for this to be worth the uninkable spot. Because there's plenty of times where if you had this and could ink it, you'd want to. And you're just not going to be able to. So unfortunately, the Prince for me is an F. But I'm not going to blame you for drafting it in the C territory if you can really use, even as high as a C+, if you can really use bodyguards. Right? All right. Minnie Mouse Storyteller. Hopefully this one is a lot easier. F. It's uninkable 1/2 that you might be able to quest for 1 or 2 lore for a few turns, and then you might stall out on it. But ultimately, giving the minus strength isn't going to be a huge thing. Not worth a 2-cost uninkable 1/2 body that's going to get removed super easily. And you're going to want to ink more often than not. It's an F. It's a much lower F than the Prince. The Prince is probably going to be the top of my F category, minus maybe some uninkables. But that one's a hard F. So Much to Give. 2-cost inkable action song. Draw a card. Chosen character gains bodyguard until the start of your next turn. I'm pretty happy with this. I like songs. I like free. I like inkable. I like draw a card. And I like bodyguard. Ultimately, it's not a massive impact. So it's not worth like a super high pick. But I've got this at C+, because I think more often than not, I'm going to be pretty happy with this. And I'd be much happier with this than the Prince. Because ultimately, I can ink it when I need to. And if I need that bodyguard that's going to last a turn to stall out the game, I can use this and get my card back. So I'm much happier with this than with the Prince. It necessitates having some bigger bodies that are going to warrant bodyguard in your deck. But hopefully that's not too hard for you to plan around unless you're taking this super late. Right? All right. Spaghetti Dinner. 2-cost uninkable. It's an item that might gain you a lore from time to time. It's a hard F. Harder than Minnie Mouse, because Minnie Mouse is at least a character. Yeah. The Glass Slipper. I want to talk about harder Fs. It is a 2-cost uninkable item. You can only have 2 copies. That's not going to be problematic. Though, oddly enough, that does actually affect Limited. Because in Limited, you're not limited by copies normally. But this one, because it says it on the card, supersedes that. Banish this item. Exert one of your princes. There's not enough princes. I don't care about fishing for a princess at the cost of a card. No thank you. Hardest of hard Fs. All right. Honey Marin. 2-cost, inkable, 2/2, 1 lore. If you watched my quick hits video, you know that this is one of the top because it says, when you play this character, if an opponent has an exerted character in play, gain 1 lore. I am often critical of abilities that require something else to be in effect for it to happen, right? You have to jump through some hoop. But of all the hoops, this is about the easiest to jump through. In a game of limited, your opponent is going to have exerted characters. Now, I'm probably not wanting to play this on 2 or 3 or 4, because ultimately I want to be playing more impactful characters at that time. What I want this for is the same reason we want GOAT, is to win the game near the end, right? So either I'm a turn away from winning and I really want to ramp it up and I'm ready to kind of push for it, go all in, or I'm about to win, like on this turn. So one of those 2 times is kind of when I want to play this. So again, another 2-drop that I don't really want to play on curve. So again, one of my favorite 2-drops is not really a curve out option. So again, this set is going to be slower. I know I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating. So I got Honey Marin at B. I think definitely below Penny, but and substantially below, but still quite good. All right, Elsa, Trusted Sister, 2-cost, inkable, 2/3, 1 lore. When you play this character, if you have a character named Anna in play, gain 1 lore. I mean, there's a good uncommon Anna, but there's one, and it's probably never going to happen. So just assume this is a vanilla. If you get it off, that's gravy, but don't draft it like you're ever going to. But you should know that I'm usually pretty strong on and happy with the 2-cost, 2/3 vanillas. And nothing's changed in this set because it's a set with not a lot of 2-drops that I'm thrilled about. I've got this at I think a B or a B-. What do I have it at, Heath? I've got it at a B. I think definitely below Honey Marin, but still quite happy with just the 2-cost, 2/3s, because it'll take care of, especially if your opponent's playing some of these weaker 1-drops, you're going to get 2-for-1s easily in there. It's just going to help stall the board out a little bit. There's plenty of 2/2s, as you saw, at 2-drop. So it trades favorably. It challenges favorably, more specifically, into a lot of those. Yzma, Transformed Kitten, 2-cost, inkable, 2/1, 1 lore. When this character is banished, if you have more cards in hand than each opponent, you may return this card to your hand. Now, we've had a Hey before, where you just get to do this no matter what. So this is a substantially worse version of that. And I'm going to say, in a lot of games in Limited, you're going to have probably the same amount of cards, which is 0, other than when you draw. So yeah, on your turn, you're probably going to be able to make this work because you're just drawn, right? So if you both had 0 cards in hand, you draw, you challenge in this before you do anything, and then return it. Cool. Hey was a beast in Limited. I'm very worried about this not being just super annoying to play with, not play against, play with. So I still think it's, something that I wouldn't blame you for playing, but I've got it at D+ because I think it's just going to be too cumbersome. It's probably one that'll play out better than that, I'm going to be honest. I'm a little biased here, but I just think it's clunky, and I'd just rather have a smoother experience than Yzma's going to provide. Raja, Ghostly Tiger, 2-cost, inkable, 3/3, 1 lore with Vanish. So the Vanish ability is when an opponent chooses this character for an action specifically, not challenging, not an item ability, not a character ability, an action card, whether song or otherwise, you banish them. And they mentioned in the rules, they elaborated if Raja has left the zone. So if it's a action that returns Raja to my hand, it'll be returned before the Vanish ability resolves. So the Vanish ability just fizzles. So it's got to be something that leaves it on the board. So, we talked in the 1-drop, probably the best target for this is the, oh goodness, what was the healing one at 1-drop? It was Restoring the Heart. So Restoring the Heart is probably the best means of disposing of this. And there will be times where you feel bad, you play Raja, and they play something that removes it, and you're feeling a little sad about that. But here's the thing. One, I mentioned this in the Quick Hits video, early game, they're less likely to have those. So if you can just eke out good value from this early, this is one of the ones you do want to play on curve, that is best on curve. So you play it out on turn 2, you 2-for-1 with a couple of early drops, or run it into their 3 or 4 drop. Great. mid to late game, it might be ink, or it might just be something that's so inconsequential in the mid to late game that, yeah, it's efficient for you and you're happy with it, but your opponent doesn't necessarily want to use their abilities on it, where they might be happier removing damage from their own character and drawing that card rather than removing your Raja. So there's going to be plenty of times where I don't think that this is impactful enough to warrant the removal, but is so impactful relative to its cost that you're going to be really happy with it. So I've got Raja at a B+, and I think this is the best 2-drop in the set, but it's certainly not one to just play with abandon and not think about those potential impacts. Notably, I did the math when I first did these reviews. I think there was only like 4 or 5 actions that can remove it, and probably only half of those that you actually care to draft. So I wouldn't worry too much about Raja being removed. We'll talk in the 4 drops about a card that is more likely to be targeted, the Iago. So we've got Diablo, Spiteful Raven, 2-cost, Inkable, 1/2, 1 lore, Evasive, Challenger, +2. So I'm going to be very clear. When I first reviewed this, I tend to review in a bit of a vacuum when I first look at it, and I had this at a C+. And I think this needs to be bumped up a lot, and probably should have been in my quick hits video for the 2 drops. And my question is just, is it below or above Penny? And I think it's probably above Penny, and I'll tell you why. It's because ultimately there's a lot of really impactful, low rarity evasives in this set that are bombs. We covered in the quick hits video, those 4 drops, right? And if you don't have a way to deal with that, you're in trouble. So when I was reviewing this at first, I was like, I'd rather just have a 2/2 to be frank. 2/2 to be frank. Because I usually want to be questing with my evasives. However, because there is those really powerful 3 willpower evasives in this set, Diablo becomes really effective, right? So he might even be above Raja, to be frank with you. For me, I put him below Raja in a vacuum, but I put him above Raja if you're struggling to find ways to deal with evasives. You just have to be prepared to deal with those. More so even than Tinkerbell in the last set. You just have to be prepared to deal with those. And Diablo is a great way to do that. Archimedes, 2-cost, Inkable, 2/2, 1 lore, ally. Whenever an opponent chooses this character for an ability or action, you may draw a card. They're not going to. This is a 2-cost, 2/2, which makes it a D. And below Yzma for sure. Probably even below Troubadour, to be frank. Okay. Magical Moments, 2-cost, Inkable, action. Return chosen character of yours to your hand. Exert chosen character. That is not worth it. Negative tempo is bad. Yes, I know. We all know from the bounce packages in Amethyst that returning to your hand can be powerful, but usually much less so in Limited. It's really a tempo game. Now, again, this is going to be slower than most drafts, so I'm prepared to be proven wrong that the tempo might not be so important that this isn't worth resetting one of your bombs. But I'm really worried about the negative tempo here. And for the benefit of exerting an opponent's character, that can be really powerful in the end game when they got something that's going to win and you got no other way to deal with it, right? It almost acts as removal. You can now challenge it where you couldn't challenge it otherwise. But that's just so infrequent, such a niche scenario. Yes, there are times mid-game where I'm going to be like, ooh, I'd love to challenge this now rather than let it quest. But is that worth a card? Is that worth having this in your deck? And I would say no. So this is the epitome of the Ds for me. It's an inkable card that has a niche scenario where it is very good, but most of the time is trash. So I don't really want to actively be drafting this, but I'm perfectly fine to have it in my deck as ink with the thought towards every once in a while those niche scenarios will come up, and then I'll be happy I've got it, right? So that's the perfect D+ for me. This is my family. 2-cost, uninkable, action, song, gain 1 lore, draw a card. If you remember back to Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, I rated that as an F because I don't want to dedicate an uninkable card to just gaining a couple lore. But when I can sing it, and when I can draw a card and replace it, and gain a lore, that becomes interesting. I've got it as... Wow, did I really rate that as a B-? Okay, I might have been a little aggressive at that point. It's probably not that. I think certainly above Trusty, but definitely below So Much to Give. I'm going to be really tempted to draft this. I probably rate it at that because that's where I plan on taking it. I think I'm comfortable being more aggressive with this. But you got to be super mindful of your uninkables. Now, here's the great thing. The reason why you're worried about uninkables is because they get trapped in your hand. You'd rather have something else to ink. This being a song and drawing you a card means that there's a good chance that you can cycle this without paying any ink, find an inkable card to ink, and then be off to the races. So this is less risk than your average uninkable card. So keep that in mind. I wish I could talk more about it, but we got to keep pushing on for time. We're already at so many minutes. Show me more. 2-cost uninkable action. Each player draws 3 cards. Cool. Here's the problem. Unless you manage to build an extremely aggressive build in a set that's going to be slow, you're drawing your opponent into bombs and they're getting the first crack at it. Yes, admittedly, if you have like 6, 7, 8 ink, you play this and you've still got ink to play with. But you're taking on way too much risk, especially with an uninkable card, that you're going to draw your opponent into better cards than you have, and they're going to get more chance to benefit from it early. So just not worth the risk. Did I put this? Yeah, I put this as an F. Where do I have it in here? I'm going to put it below the characters just because I like characters that quest above it, but it doesn't really matter. Why am I getting all that fussed about why am I getting fussed about where the F's are? I don't know. Okay, shout out to Benny Overexerted for telling me how to pronounce Grunge, I think he said. Awful. 2-cost, inkable, 2/2/1 lore. When this character quests, you pay 1 less for the next action you play this turn. You're hardly going to have any actions in your deck. Making them cost 1 less probably isn't that impactful to have a 2-cost, 2/2 body. This is a D+, I'm assuming I got it. Yep, another D+. I would put it below Magical Maneuvers, but even below Yzma. Yep. Yzma should probably be like a C- because she's got, if you can maneuver her, she's going to be somewhat impactful, but still not worth it. All right. Somebody called me out on not rating Baymax higher in my quick hit. So we got a 2-cost inkable, Baymax low battery, 3/2, 2 lore. This character enters play exerted. Why did I not have this in my top picks? So I actually really like, we had a dwarf once upon a time that was a 2/3/2 lore came into play exerted. I actually prefer that to this. And the reason being is when I've got a character that comes into play exerted, I liked Dale, the 3-cost 3/4/2 lore that came into play exerted. I want them to be able to survive. Right? I don't want someone running their 1-drop into this before I've even had a chance to quest with it. Right? So I want the higher willpower in that case. So this is more vulnerable. Baymax becomes best on the play. Because there's hardly any 2-strength 1-drop characters in this set, or just 1-drops worth playing. On the play, Baymax can be great. But on the draw, Baymax is probably going to be ink. So as a result, he becomes like 50-50 good for me. So I've got him as a like C+. I'm willing to... No, I don't think I'm willing to put it about so much to give. I know you would, and that's okay. But I just... Yeah. I don't know. Oh, there's so many bad 1-drops. But even the 2-drops, but at worst their 2-drops are trading with this. But then I don't get to quest. I don't know. All right, I'm going to put it above so much to give. I've negotiated with myself, but my heart says so much to give is better. All right, Yokai, 2-cost, inkable, 1/2/1 lore. You may pay 1 less to play characters with a shift ability. That's not going to be relevant. You almost never shift in limited. Sure, if you got the Baymax, it costs 3 universal shift instead of 4. That's not worth playing a 2-cost 1/2. He's not even a D. I want to put him as an F. So I'll put him above Prince because... No, I won't even. You know what? He's worse than Prince, even as an inkable. Yeah, it's a trap. Don't bother. Donald Duck, Lively Pirate, 2-cost uninkable, 1/1/2 lore. Whenever this character is challenged, you may return an action card that isn't a song from your discard to your hand. There's not many actions you're going to draft in the set. Most of the ones I like are songs, so it's a 2-cost uninkable, 1/1/2 lore, which is not nearly good enough. This is an F, I'm assuming I have it as... He has to remind himself of his own ratings. Because it's 2 lore, it's definitely above Prince. But beyond that, no. 2-cost Inkable, 2/2 1 lore Yzma, Exasperated Schemer. When you play this character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. Compare this to Mulan, which is a 1-cost 2/1 with the same effect. Well, it's not nearly good enough. What do I have Yzma as? A C-? Yeah, in a pinch, she can be usable, but not nearly good enough. The Tramp, 2-cost Inkable, 1/3 1 lore. If you have a character named Lady in play, which you shouldn't. Well, I mean, if you've got the 5-cost Lady, sure. This costs 1 less to play. Great, it's a 1/3 now. When you play this character, chosen character gets +1 strength for each other character you have in play. Could be great, but again, it's just so circumstantial. This is one of those hoops that I'm not particularly thrilled to draw through. So is he a 2-cost 1/3 1 lore that gives +2 strength? Fine. I think I prefer that to the 2/1s that have done that in the past. Still not good enough. I would rate him as, probably a high C-, but a C- nonetheless. I'll take him above Yzma. Duchess. This is a very common one. 2-cost, Inkable, 3/2 1 lore, vanilla. That's it. Fine. This is like the epitome of a C. I would put it below Trusty, but above Candlehead. Yeah. Below Trusty, above Candlehead is perfectly fine for Duchess. These are going to get cramped pretty soon. All right. Grandmother Fa. 2-cost Inkable, 1/1 2 lore ally. Whenever this character quests, you may give chosen character of yours +2 strength this turn. So this is technically reusable, but going to get banished immediately. So let's just compare it to Tramp. Would I rather a 1/1 2 lore that gives +2 strength, or would I rather a 1/1 2 lore, or 1/3 1 lore that gives 2 strength? Probably Grandmother Fa. The fact of the matter is I also get to control when this happens, whereas Tramp has to be when I play him. This, I can sandbag it for a few turns until I'm ready to really take advantage of it, but it's still too fragile for too mediocre an ability. I think I feel good enough about it to rate it over Candlehead, maybe? Interchangeably, in that range. Queen of Hearts! Someone else called me out about why isn't this in your top picks? 2-cost Inkable, 1/4 1 lore. While this character has damage, he gets +3 strength. I traditionally hate the 2-cost 1/4s, but those are usually vanillas. So when this character has damage, she gets +3 strength. That's not bad. My concern is that she just gets eliminated on one shot, and then that's an irrelevant thing where she only dealt 1 damage back. But for that risk, and the problem is there's not a lot of 1 willpower characters that this is going to remove and then be a 4 strength character. So I really have to run this into a 1/3, do nothing, and then she's a 4/4 or a 4/3 at that point. Again, it's clunky, but I will say that this is probably more impactful with the clunky, tagline than Yzma is. It was also mentioned, she's also a shift for the Floodborn Queen of Hearts. Spoiler alert, you're going to see this. I do not rate the Floodborn Queen of Hearts high at all. Specifically, I rate it as an F. So spoiler alert, I don't like the Floodborn Queen of Hearts. So as a result, that is a non-entity to me, but being able to potentially have a 2-cost 4/4 is pretty good. Where do I had this at C, and I think it's probably around there, and specifically I think I'll put it above Trusty, above This Is My Family, sure. I can dig with it there, somewhere in this range here. Cybug, 2-cost Inkable, 1/2 1 lore. This character gets +1 strength for each other character you have in play. On average, you're going to have 2 to 3 characters in play. So it's a 2-cost 3/2 most of the time, which puts it at Duchess level, but there's a chance it could be higher. There's also a chance it could be lower, but I'll take that risk that it could be a 2-cost 4/2, in which case I'll rate it slightly above Duchess. On average, it is going to be Duchess. The Phantom Blot, 2-cost uninkable, 3/1 1 lore Rush. I really like Rush characters. Specifically, they act like quasi-removal in a set that is really lacking for removal. I really like Rush characters that can 2-for-1, so they rush in on a character that they thought was free from being challenged, and you banish it and keep your character in play to then potentially trade with another character. So a la 3/3 Rush for 3 uninkable. I would definitely rather have a 3-cost uninkable 3/3 Rusher, But beggars can't be choosers in this set, so I've got this as a C+, just out of sheer desperation, and I definitely feel like it's above Baymax. Sorry. Sir K, 2-cost uninkable, or 2-cost inkable, sorry. 2/2, 2 lore, vanilla. This is like the quintessential C- for me in most sets. I'm going to rate it above those, and I think below Grandmother Fa. Interchangeable. We got a lot of C- in here. C minuses. All right, Milo Thatch. Another 2-cost inkable 2/2 1 horse. So many of these in this set, which is why the 2/3 is great. When you play an action, you may give chosen character +2 strength this turn. There's not nearly enough actions in this set. You might get it off once, but even then, probably not. So really, it's a C- at best, probably a D+. You know what? We got a lot of C-. I'm putting this one in D+. Ruby Coil, 2-cost, inkable, item. During your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, chosen character gets +2 strength this turn. Like this more than Amber Coil. It's probably going to be more impactful, but it's still an item that is costing you a card that might not really have that much impact, especially later. This is the most horrendous of top decks. Unless you've got a way to take advantage of this beyond what this is, for me, this is like a C- at best. I'm not even willing to put it above Yzma. I think any character almost at 2-drop is going to be better than this. Any inkable character. Maybe not Milo Thatch. Alright, Devil's Eye Diamond, 2-cost, inkable, item, exert. If one of your other characters is damaged this turn, gain 1 lore. Not nearly good enough. Circumstantial, has to exert, so you can only do it once. It's 1 lore. You'll probably get a decent amount of lore out of this, 3 lore, but over the course of several turns, where if you played something that impacted the board, you might be better served for it. I still think this is a D+, because I think, you know, in niche situations, again, what's the quintessential D+? An inkable card that in niche situations is going to be really good. If you've got a bunch of characters that are going to be challenging over the next few turns, and you need to keep pace in the lore game, maybe it's useful. If you got ways to take advantage of the items beyond it, right? Monsieur Doc. You can banish it after you've kind of made best use of it. Great. Okay. Matthias, 2-cost, inkable, 3/2, 1 lore. Your queen characters gain ward. So it's automatically better than Duchess because it's 3/2 vanilla plus. Chances are you're not really going to have any queen characters in play. There are some in the set. This is an ally, by the way, so that is notable as well. So that also makes it better than Duchess. I think because it's an ally, I'm going to put it above Cybug. But it's around that range. Freckles, 2-cost, inkable, 2/2, 1 lore. It is a puppy, specifically Freckles Good Boy, which I love. It is a puppy, so if you try to do the puppy synergy, here you go. When you play this character, chosen opposing character gets -1 strength this turn. Not nearly enough there to warrant the 2/2. I think that's more impactful than Yzma. I would probably say that's more impactful than Candlehead, but again, we're just not saying much here. So... yeah, let's throw it where... oh, did I miss one? I missed Marie. I'm sorry. We're still going to put Freckles and then we'll come back to Marie. So, yeah, probably the most impactful of the 2-cost 2/2s that aren't 2 lore. Yeah, I'm going to put it below Sir K. All right. Sorry, Marie. 2-cost, inkable, 1/2, 2 lore. It is an ally. When you play this character, you may give chosen character -2 strength this turn. So now I'm losing a strength, but I'm gaining a lore, and I'm gaining an extra minus strength. That is definitely better than Freckles, and I'm going to say that's better than Sir K. It's still all C minuses. Like, I think Grandma Fawn below is all C minus. Like, it's rough. You should be getting these late, but at least it's better than those. Honey Lemon, Chemistry Whiz, 2-cost, inkable, 2/2, 1 lore. When you play a Floodborn character, if you use Shift, you may remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. You're not going to be shifting all that much, if at all. Probably almost never. And removing 2 damage isn't worth it. So it's down with those 2/2s. I'm going to put this again with the Ds. That's like a better than Milo Thatch territory. Penny the Orphan. Specifically not Penny Bolt's person. Different Penny. 2-cost, inkable, 2/1, 2 lore. While you have a hero character in play, this character gains ward. Ward isn't going to matter in a set with almost no removal. Yes, there is some 1 damage moving, 1 damage removal, where it's relevant it's not like never relevant. It's just almost never relevant. So you pretty much have to treat this as a vanilla, which puts it below Sir K for sure. I would say below Freckles. Probably above Candlehead just because of the 2 lore. Sapphire Coil. During your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may give chosen character -2 strength this turn. 2-cost inkable items specifically. So I would rate this above Ruby Coil because I'd rather make your characters weaker and more likely for my characters to survive a challenge than my characters able to trade up more. I want to stay on the board. So I like this better than Ruby Coil, but that's about it. Okay. Next we've got Akela, another 2-cost 3/2. We basically have 3 of those in this set, which considering we only have one cost 2/2, really upsets me. Is there any reason to give this more or less than Duchess? There is not, so it goes below Duchess. Helga Sinclair, 2-cost uninkable, 0/4, 1 lore. Challenger +3, and during your turn this character gains Evasive. Frankly, and if you saw my top hits video, you saw this in there, I like this better than Diablo. I'd rather this to deal with it than Diablo, just because this can get rid of remove those characters and survive to tell the tale. Now, it's a 0/4 when it survives, so chances are it's just getting removed right away, but not for sure. Whereas Diablo is absolutely trading with those. So if I got some bodyguards and I can protect Helga, now, Helga is uninkable, so I was more trying to say I like it better as a card in a vacuum, right? Or just on rate rather than the inkable versus the uninkable. So does the uninkable bring it down below Diablo? I would say yes, because I don't really want to necessarily be playing either if I'm not dealing with one of those evasives. So I'd rather the ability to ink, if so. But I think on rate, I like Helga better, but they're pretty much interchangeable. They're going to be essential if you don't have other ways to deal with evasives. Like evasives of your own. Bolt, Headstrong Dog, 2-cost inkable, 1/3, 1 lore. Whenever this character quests, if it has no damage, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. You might get that off once, but that 1/3 is going to have damage real soon, which is to say it's going to be eliminated. So where do I have Bolt at? I have Bolt at a D+, and rightfully so. Yeah, I think that puts it above Devil's Eye Diamond, because I get to cycle at least once, or filter at least once. Tuk Tuk, 2-cost, uninkable, 0/1, 1 lore, bodyguard, resist +2. This is basically the prince in another form. And it's going to perish just as easily. It will survive the early turns just as much as Prince will. It will perish easily in the late turns just as much as Prince will. So, same as Prince, I'd rate it slightly high. No, slightly lower. Slightly higher. Yeah. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Interchangeable. But same rule applies. If you can really take advantage of bodyguards, it's something to consider. Razul, Menacing Guard, 2-cost, inkable, 1/3, 1 lore ally. When you play this character, if you have a character named Jafar in play, you may banish chosen item. You're not really caring about banishing items. It's not going to happen very often, and you're not going to have Jafars very often. So as a result, Razul is, I'm even going to say it like an F. Like, that's a weak body. It's still a body. So we're still going to put it... Oh, wow. Above Archimedes, below Archimedes. I'd probably rather a 2/2 than a 1/3. So, yep, there we go. Yikes. All right. Mickey Mouse, Inspirational Warrior, 2-cost uninkable, 1/1, 1 lore. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may play a character for free. In limited, it's going to be hard for you to set this up in such a way where it can banish anything that isn't 1 willpower. You're unlikely to have a character in play at the time that you can do that will benefit from being put into play for free, which is to say you probably have 1 card left in your hand. It's going to have times where it's going to blow you out, and you're going to be so sad. You're going to have a 2/1 on board, and they're going to have a 7-drop in hand, and you're going to be so sad. But for the amount of times this will rot on your board or in your hand, I don't love it. So I think this is a powerful F, which is to say it could be a bomb in some circumstances. Whoa. That's not what I meant to do, but that's okay. I was dragging over the card from there versus from here. All right. I should just leave A on its own. Yeah, so there's times where it's going to blow you out, but the amount of times relative to how bad it is going to be a lot of the times, it's just not worth it for me. I'm not going to take the risk. I'm not going to fault you for it. It's splashy. Go for it. You're probably going to draft it anyway, just for the card. So you might as well try it. But yeah, no thanks. For anyone that's new to the channel, I don't rate cards based on, oh, I'm going to draft it anyway because it's a legendary and it might be worth money and I'm just going to take it, right? I try to rate these based on if the cards were worth nothing and there was nothing, on the line other than winning. That would be where we're at. Okay, Double Trouble. 2-cost, inkable, action, deal 1 damage to up to 2 chosen characters. Again, I started rating this in a vacuum. I rated this as a C+. Okay, I might get a 2-for-1 out of this. Or, I probably got to it's again clunky. I probably got to, facilitate a world in which I get a 2-for-1 out of this, but it's possible. And there's not much removal in the set. This is where we're at now. There's almost no removal in the set. I really wish, and I know that they don't really phrase it like this, but in Magic, if any of you are familiar with Magic the Gathering, an effect like this would usually say, deal 2 damage to up to 2 chosen characters, which is to say, I could deal 2 to 1 character or 1 to 2 characters. If it was that, this would be fantastic, because it would deal with Snow White, and it would just give you more options. It is not that. So Ravensburger, if you want to make a great card for Limited, deal 2 damage to up to 2 chosen characters. Total up to 2 chosen characters, right? 1 to 2 or 2 to 1. As it is, the fact that you have to split it up, still probably a C+, but I gotta put it in like B- territory because there's so little, like B- territory because there's so little removal. So it's probably above Honeymaron. It is less in terms of power, but necessity, you might even have to draft it higher than that because everyone else is gonna know there's no removal to be had. Steel Coil, 2-cost uninkable item. During your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. If Glass Slipper wasn't in this set, this would be the worst card in the set. Oh, that's so bad. Training Staff, 2-cost uninkable item. Exert, pay 1 ink. Chosen character gains Challenger +2 this turn. I couldn't just say Strength +2, but I'm sure there's reasons. Again, just not good enough. Right? Yes, you can guarantee this more than you can Ruby Coil, but it costs an ink to do it. And if you happen to have a ramp card, the Coil is going to be more effective in that space. So I would rank this below Ruby Coil, and just for the sake of room here, we're going to rank it in the Ds here, D+. All right, we have no A's. This is our rankings. So we got, what do we got? 7 Bs. I had 6 original, but I had to shift Diablo up there once I recognized the need for him, and just how needed he is. It's amazing what need will do to the value of a card, right? Yeah, suffice to say, a lot of meh 2-drops, but there's some really good ones in there, so pay attention and watch out for them, because you can't be going turn 1 and turn 2 without doing anything. So you're really going to need some 2-drops if the 1-drops are just completely leaving you out to dry. So there we go. There's our 2-drops. So starting tomorrow, you're going to be able to see some special guests joining me as we deal with the 3-drops tomorrow, 4-drops, 5-drops, leading up to 6+ just before launch. Good luck, everyone, with your set releases this weekend. I hope you have a blast. Let me know how you're feeling about draft in the comments below. If you can, give a like and subscribe. But most importantly of all, share it. Share it to people that do love draft. Share it to people that might love draft. And, again, love the feeling of people enjoying the content. But I'd really like to think that it's not about me. It's about letting more people know about how amazing draft is. So get them excited for it. Get them thinking about it. We tend to like things that we're better at. So help them improve their limited games so that they feel better about it. I'm trying to do that at my local store. Shout out to all you at Aegis Games down in Bellingham. And now we've got another store up in Semiahmoo that I'll be potentially visiting shortly. So spoiler alert there. But yeah, love it. Take care, everyone. Have fun. We'll see you next time. Cheers.